Welcome back to Takacs McGinnis Elder Care Law Hour. I'm Tim Takacs, and in today's episode we're going to talk about maybe the uncomfortable business of dying. What are the knowns and unknowns, things that everybody at some point is going to have to confront or deal with, right?
Yeah. And I'm Barbara McGinnis. Sometimes that traditional funeral is not right for your loved one and you're looking for something different, something non-traditional. Well, with us in this episode or in this segment is John Phifer. John Christian Phifer, sorry.
It's okay.
And he's the executive director for Larkspur Conservation. And you're developing a natural burial or conservation. I mean, this is such a new concept, I can't even say it right. It's very cool.
We're reviving a traditional practice from our ancestors, like our great-grandparents, essentially. We're buried naturally without embalming and chemicals. And essentially what we do is we partner with the Nature Conservancy and we protect and save land, but we also create a sacred space for families to lay to rest a loved one in a protected nature preserve. Wow,
that's so interesting. So where are you located?
We're located just northeast of Nashville in Sumner County. We're between Taylor Hollow, right at Taylor Hollow, between Westmoreland and Gallatin.
All right.
So is this like a green burial? I think a lot of us have heard about the term green burial. Is that what we're talking about here?
I think green is a buzzword that's being used a lot. I like to use the word natural. Green burial, the difference between green burial or conventional burial is essentially green burial or natural burial takes into consideration the environmental impact that we actually have as people on the environment with the choices that we make.
So natural burial, no embalming, no vaults.
Right.
Studies been shown? Do we know what this is doing to water qualities or land quality?
Actually, our burial methods, the natural burial method, is actually safer and more responsible, and actually has been shown to improve water quality in comparison to the conventional method.
Okay, because it kind of sounds kind of messy if you're kind of laying dead bodies out and they rot, and then it kind of gets into our. That's not what our viewers are. Some of their viewers and maybe some of the hosts are thinking maybe that is what that means.
And that's not what we want either.
Right.
And that's actually not what happens.
Okay.
This method is very soft and simple on the environment. The body is laid to rest within the living layer of the soil, and just essentially absorbed back into the ecosystem quite quickly, quite rapidly, actually, yes, over a matter of months.
Okay.
Anything in the soil, because the soil and the plant material growing on the ground above is reabsorbing what decomposes, it never actually has any chance to reach a water table. And the earth acts as a natural filter.
Okay.
All right, but we are talking about deep enough that we're not nothing's digging us back up.
No, there's no scents, there's no animals that are attracted. It's just quite beautiful and responsible. Natural burial has been occurring throughout American history, to tell you the truth. It started on the prairie with early settlers, and it's actually still occurring now around the country in small country cemeteries. They don't necessarily require a vault or a casket. A vault's purpose is essentially to maintain a level mowing surface. It doesn't actually prevent anything from exiting the vault or the container into the soil.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the metal vault, those fancy metal vaults that get buried.
That's correct.
They actually, do they disintegrate, or I guess they don't?
They can over time. Some are constructed with concrete and steel and plastic and things that will remain for a long, long time. But there's no guarantee that they won't disintegrate over some amount of time. Vaults and outer burial containers were essentially first created to prevent grave robbing.
Yeah, okay.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And of course, what do we know is all things must pass, including burial vaults.
That's right.
So if we have a body that's there and it winds up, I guess, degrading or biodegrading into the ground, So what if people want to go see where Daddy was buried?
You still can.
But there may be not anything left, or is there like a plaque? Or
we use a native stone from our property, and it's engraved with the person's name, date of birth, and date of death. People can also live off the grid, if you will, and not have a stone, but we always use a permanent ID that's about the size of a $50 that is aluminum, that contains that person's information. And then we further back up all of our recordings with GPS and traditional mapping. And yeah, it's just kind of a really neat new way to approach something that we're all going to experience.
All right, here's another little question.
Yeah.
What about if they have a prosthesis or some sort of medical implant? Are those removed, or are they still buried with the person?
Generally, the rule of thumb in the funeral industry, because I am a licensed funeral director, an end-of-life doula, and a home funeral guide, the rule of thumb is we always would remove a pacemaker with a battery in it. Prosthetics such as a metal hip implant or dental fillings, those type of things, the procedure is too invasive to remove those, and they don't have that much of a negative impact on the environment to consider removing them before burial.
Okay. That's just all interesting things to think
about. Things we don't think about.
Right. So I want to do this, and let's say I want to, can I get a family plot?
You can.
So how do I do that?
So we operate a nature preserve. So we partnered with the Nature Conservancy. It's protected. And what happens, we maintain a natural landscape. So a family only selects the exact grave location at the time of death. But when they do select a grave location at the time of death, they can reserve an adjacent space for a spouse or another loved one.
Just one, right?
Generally one, but in the area, there's going to be space open for other family members as well.
Okay. So someone dies and they degrade, and and there's like a little aluminum $50 on the ground. Is that kind of how it works?
Generally.
And would you ever run out of space, or can we like use that again?
Well, when someone purchases burial rights through Larkspur Conservation, since we're set up as a nonprofit organization, our mission is actually to conserve land, but also to help people. So what we're doing, when someone purchases burial rights through Larkspur Conservation, we set aside funds from each purchase that will be used to save more land. So we will use that money to purchase and save more land, creating open green spaces for communities so people can go on a nature hike. It's not like you're visiting a traditional cemetery. This is like you're visiting your favorite state park. You can go wildflower watching, and you can bird watch. We have people that come out with binoculars. You know, we have universities that study the insects, the amphibians in the ponds. It's just really special, especially for nature lovers, but also people that want to connect with God in a special way. We find a lot of religious folks really feel that this is something that dials into their spirituality.
Right. Ashes to ashes,
in
a real set. Okay, what's the practical? How much does this cost compared to traditional funerals?
Well, our burial method costs $3,700 currently. It includes the opening and closing of the gravesite, the native plant revegetation, which means we use native plants from the site to revegetate. So if you're in the meadow, you'll have wildflowers and grasses and butterflies, and if you're in the woodland, you may have a tree that grows on your grave. It includes all of our genealogical archives, our GPS and mapping. It includes the perpetual care fund that will care for that site forever. And it also includes the conservation fund, which I mentioned earlier.
Right.
Wow.
And in comparison, generally a traditional funeral costs anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000. If you add in a conventional cemetery and the charges that they are going to produce to a family
for the burial spot,
it can be anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 when all is said and done.
Right. So
in this method, what happens? A family, when they experience a death, would contact someone like Smith Family Funeral Home, and they would actually help them with sanitary care of the remains, transporting the body, providing them a biodegradable container or shroud.
So you could contact a traditional funeral home, and then they can work with you? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. We actually are working with several of the local funeral directors in the community. They've already reached out. They're very excited about this. They find value in the ritual that we're creating. And there are a lot of families that just do not have the funds to pay for an expensive funeral. And the thought of a more minimal, but at the same time mindful end-of-life decision is very important.
Great. So we're going to put your contact information. We're talking with John Christian Phifer, of the Executive Director of the Larkspur Conservation.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having us. Thanks for being here.
I'm so glad you had me.
So after the final arrangements are made, there are still more actions to take towards closing your loved one's final affairs. What are they? Is there help available? All that and more when we return. Stay with us.
Thanks.